Hey YouTube! Another deck profile today on a deck that took me about 2 months to figure out how to exactly play it every time it gets support.
And it's still trash.
Actually, my win rate has increased, but at least I can win with this deck. It's Royal Paladins. Here's your starter. It's the same one, except foiled now.
I don't know why you keep going over the starter.
So this deck is actually pretty interesting. We will start off with our grade 3s. We have 3. King of Knights Alfred. This is probably your first ride target, because no matter what, this guy will always be able to help kickstart the engine of your deck. And by engine of your deck, I mean find Blaster Blade. Even if you don't ride the Blaster Blade, you still get your plays off. You still get a +1 off this card. He's a 10k beat. He's a 23k beat stick with the Blaster Blade on. So he's overall still arguably the best grade 3 in the deck, and like your most consistent ride option. So, yeah. 4 copies of our new boy. I always go back and forth on this card. I think I'm starting to warm up to him a little bit. I more or less value this as like a backup grade 3 rather than like a main grade 3. Just because in order for it to be even halfway decent as a first ride, it requires you to have ridden Blaster Blades, since it only grabs specifically Blaster Blade from the drop zone. Damn it, Bushiro, stop tying us to Blaster Blade.
It'll get better in the next set with blasters.
Yeah, okay. We have to review that, by the way.
At some point, yeah.
When
I have my
I just wish its skill wasn't on place, but it being on place sort of means that force marker, it's almost mandatory that you have to allocate this to the Vanguard, because unlike King of Knights, which is always going to be 23k because of the Blaster Blade, because it's a continuous skill, if you are on this guy for more than one turn without rewriting, he can get a little bit vanilla. But that being said, he's a decent defensive body because he makes your Blaster Blades have 10k shield and makes them 20k beaters, so they're harder to hit and pick off. So,
I mean, but then you have to have the Blaster Blades, and if they have anything that pops, bye-bye Blaster Blade.
Yeah. But...
Or bounces. Oh.
It
does give it to continuous, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not a particular issue in this case, but still, anything that pops.
2 copies of Execuplet. It's your finisher of the deck. It's actually a decent card. It's a board wipe. It gives you 2 Vanguard attacks, one of them being a crit.
I have never seen a situation in which anyone goes into Exculpate for the board wipe.
Yeah. So, a fun fact of the day, Kuchikiri Kongo does get around it, but that's just about it. Not Kuchikiri Kongo, Magatsu Storm.
Yeah, that.
But, solid card. Solid finisher. Alternate grave 3s, you could always try to Tekken Soul Saver. I've tried it. It's actually not half bad. Soul Saver is still strong.
You could run Alfred early if you're feeling cheap.
Spicy and cheap. Grade 2s. Because we have to.
Because you have to.
I mean...
Bushiroad says bend over and take our Blaster Blade.
All the support's basically centered around him. Like, the Vanguard skill's not half bad. But, like, the retire skill is sort of mediocre, and you don't really have the resources for it unless if you're in a very...
Like, the Vanguard skill's bad. You have to have the exact setup for it to be at all.
If you have the exact setup and support, which, like, the deck actually does have a decent grade 2 game, so...
The problem is, you need to be playing those resources earlier than you would want to be playing them. Like, the crit works with Exculpate, but honestly, that's about it. Otherwise, it's just a trap to try and force you to play things down before you should actually be playing them.
Well... One of the cards that helps us around with that is, this is a really fucking good card, Knight of Loyalty Bendeveer. So when he's placed, if you have Friendship of K, this grade 1 right here, you get to draw a card, so that's +1 right there. And with K, he's also a 24k beat stick. Well, the column's a 24k beat stick column, so like, it's basically your replacement for Akane, although you could still play Akane and Pongal, but this, in my opinion, just gives you more value. It's also one of the it's also probably this and K that made Royal Paladins a little bit decent. Then a lot of people for this next grade 2 slot either run Jaren or Kane. I run neither of these. I run an option that's not very popular. And 3 copies of Rendering Angel. So, when Rendering Angel is placed, you can choose a card from your hand, call it, and this card gets 5k till the end of the turn. I run this over Jaren specifically because it combos with another grade 1 we're playing that I'll tell you about later. One thing to note is that Jaren only gets his 5k when 2 conditions are met. One when they're attacking a Vanguard, which can be a bit awkward, because then it means that you're not swinging for 15k against a rear guard if you really want to get rid of it. And 2, it needs 3 rear guards, which against control decks can be a little bit dicey, whereas this guy will always be 15k. And you can just sort of intercept him away. And the other thing is, too, because you will end up on King of Knights here later in the game anyways, you're going to mostly want your front row columns to be Blaster Blade to sort of have your beat sticks anyway, so I think that's another reason why you can justify this over Jaren, because of the upside of the combo with the grade 1 that it has. And let's get to those grade 1s. So we have 4 copies of Bendevir's partner. We have K. So in addition to being able to be called from hand by Bendivir, he himself searches for Bendivir. It's a +1, improves the consistency of the deck, gives you an extra unit, and it turns a K in Bendivir column into 24k, which is phenomenal. If you're not running 4 copies of this card in Royal Paladin, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Next, we run 4 copies of Alan. Alan over Marin, because again, Alan will combo specifically with the next grade 1 that I play. Even though, in 2, Alan is just really good for that early game pressure. Because he calls a card and then draws a card, so that's a +1 right there, and he also gains 3k, so you can sort of, if your opponent's on grade 1, or even grade 2, you can just put him in the front row, so he can be able to swing on that grade 2 by himself, and then have another column ready to go. So, really like Alan. Still our boy from the trial deck, have him all foiled out too. Finally, another spicy tech that not a lot of people run, because most people either go for Marin or like some combination of like Wingle, or maybe they run Pongle because they're running Akane, but I choose to go for 4 copies of Dream Painter. I really enjoy this card, actually.
What's that should do?
So when it's called from an ability from your hand, actually just when called from an ability in general, so in this case, either Rendering Angel or Alan are the partners for this card. You can choose a grade 2 or less card from your drop zone, and you can either put it into the soul or put it to the bottom of your deck. If you put the card to the bottom of your deck, this card gets 5k. So like, it's really solid because it's able to recycle, say, searchable cards like Blaster Blade or...
Blaster Blade.
I know, Bendivir is searchable. So you can recycle these from your drop zone after you've done intercepting them. You can return triggers to your deck, which is really solid. Especially something that Royal Paladins needed. And it can even help improve the consistency of your execute turns, because you can grab that Blaster Blade from your drop zone and put it into the soul. I just wish it wasn't restricted to grade 2 or lowers, because then this could combo really well with first crit King of Knights, but I guess they had to balance it in some way. So, I really like this card, actually, and ironically, it's helped improve the consistency of the deck for something that a lot of people called inconsistent as a card.
I mean, it is, though.
Gotta play the support around it.
But the issue is then you're still relying on a 2-card combo, which is by definition inconsistent.
It's true. But it does help with certain situations. Trigger lineup is pretty standard. You have your 8 crit, 4 draw, 4 heal lineup. I mean,
would you consider going to 12 crit when the extra starter deck, whatever the shit they call that thing, is out?
Nah. Just because the grade 1 lineup is so good already that I wouldn't really want to.
Would you replace Flow Gold with blue?
Probably. Probably. We'll have to see about that. But anyways, that's the deck. Got up to a slow start with it at the beginning of Miyagi Academy, but since then I've improved a little bit with it. Thoughts on the deck overall is it's quite solid, but never like going to be world beating.
Good matchups, bad matchups?
Bad matchups, anything that can sort of just outgrind it, just because outside of Excuplit, this deck doesn't really hit for force numbers as big as, say, Spike Brothers. And in those matchups like Angel Feather and Oracle Think Tank, you have to get the solid grade 2 game going, or else they sort of just out-resource you through the entire game. Shadow Paladins are like... It's like quite a bit of a toss-up, just because like they can't afford to damage deny you, and this deck blows through a lot of counter blasts.
Of course they can afford to damage deny you.
But like also just this against control in general, this deck does well against control in general just because it sort of has a lot of ways to tutor out a board. It does actually pretty decent against certain Excel decks because it does have a decent enough of a plussing engine to sort of stabilize. But like I said, other than that, this deck is like your jack of all trades but expert at none. So like it'll always be a solid tier 2, like tier 1.5 if you believe in that deck. But it's never gonna have quite the qualities it needs to like propel you to winning a tournament, so.
Alright. Parting shots?
Give us a fucking countercharger eventually.
That'll do. Bye-bye!